You have waited 12 months in a thick silence. That invisible period was slowly draining the confidence of a graduate student who once held high hopes of entering the world only seen on screen in childhood, the Central Intelligence Agency. It all started with a click to submit an online application to the CIA, followed by a phone call with dry behavioral questions. A few days later, an unmarked package dropped onto the doorstep. Inside were thick stacks of documents. They asked you to quantify your loyalty through written lines about your motivations for joining. You diligently typed an essay analyzing a current international crisis, learning to condense humanity's suffering into emotionless, strategic bullet points. You completed online personality assessments and IQ tests. Then they sent you a plane ticket to Virginia. After that, you were pushed into closed interview rooms, facing CIA officers and psychologists. Under the pale fluorescent lights, they began with background checks, tracing back your past, even finding people whose names you no longer remembered. You spent the entire day sitting before a lie detector, every forgotten memory dragged into the light. 12 months of silence have passed since the interview. Everything you've done has led to this moment. The phone suddenly vibrated, buzzing loudly on the wooden surface. You picked up the phone, pressing the cold plastic to your ear. A flat female voice, as if precisely programmed only to convey information. Your application has been approved. There were no cheers or congratulations. The female voice remained emotionless. If the government asked you to become a completely different person and never to speak of it for the rest of your life, would you do it? All you could hear was the heavy thumping of your own heartbeat. Yes, you replied. Welcome to the Central Intelligence Agency. Rank 1, Analyst. You left the home that raised you, leaving your entire past behind, severing all connections with the old world to pursue the dream you once believed was yours. The decay of a human life begins here. The first 2 years passed under pale fluorescent lights. On the desk, your personal phone was tightly sealed in an anti-static bag. The workload was an endless loop. Thousands of diplomatic cables, blurry satellite images, intercepted audio recordings. You picked through the chaos of humanity, discarding emotional noise, and forced it into a standardized administrative framework. The organization maintained a dry and cruel unwritten law. Every collapse of a regime, every seed of rebellion, every human life must be condensed into a document that superiors can skim in under 3 minutes. If the analysis is wrong, national policy goes astray. If the analysis is correct, no one remembers you. You diligently drafted the daily briefing report for the president. The report went through 4 distinct rounds of review. Your name was never allowed to appear on any signature line, and this invisible dedication was valued at $65,000 a year. Stepping out of the agency, you put on the disguise of blandness. Your family believed you merely sorted papers at the State Department. When someone curiously asked about your profession, you said you did research for the government. The conversation ended shortly after. How boring. Boredom was the safest shelter. But when you returned to that cubicle, flipping through an old morning newspaper, you realized you were living half a year ahead of humanity. The shocking events on today's front page had actually been on your desk 6 months ago. You knew which government was about to collapse. You knew which alliances were fracturing. You had a clear profile of a man half a world away who was calculating a move that would reshape the entire regional map. You typed his name into Thursday afternoon's report, decisively, without judgment. Your superior only used a black ink pen to underline 1 paragraph, then quietly forwarded it upstairs. There was no praise, no nod, just a thin line of ink across the page. That's all you got. Rank 2. It was the perfect coldness in quantifying lives on paper that granted you a new passport. 18 months of training at a facility called The Farm in Harvey Point. The organization proceeded to reprogram you. The newsreader under the fluorescent lights was dead. You became the case officer, a predator in diplomatic disguise. 2:15 p.m. The wet underground parking lot of a suburban supermarket. You are sitting in a rented sedan, tapping slowly on the steering wheel, waiting. The target appears. A mid-level official from the local Ministry of Defense. His shoulders are slumped with fatigue and the bitterness of someone who has just been removed from the promotion list for the 3rd time. As he backs his car out of the space, you slowly release the brake. A dull thud. Your front bumper perfectly scrapes his rear bumper. The angle is meticulously calculated, not strong enough to call the police, but annoying enough for both parties to get out. You open the car door, putting on a well-practiced look of apology. Under the flickering neon lights of the parking lot, the hunt officially begins. Humans are just a collection of fractured pieces. You have memorized his overdue credit card statement. In your eyes, he is no longer a human being. He is a desperate potential. You offer to pay cash for compensation. You invite him for a coffee by the roadside to settle things amicably. At that corner table, you pour him understanding. You nod at the injustices he inadvertently complains about. You listen more than you speak. You weaponize empathy, turning yourself into the sole confidant of someone adrift. He believes your appearance is destiny, a serendipitous lifeline for a stagnant life. But he doesn't know that he is just the next name on an endless list. You have done this with hundreds of others. 100 calculated collisions, 100 forced apologies, 100 coffees, steeped in pity. You repeat a few manipulative scripts until your facial muscles automatically adjust to a smile without your brain needing to react. To the intelligence machine, this official is nothing special. He is just raw material, passing through the conveyor belt of betrayal production. A few months later, when the roots of trust have grown deep, you slide a manila envelope across the table. The offer of treason is made lightly, silently. He stares at the stack of money, then slowly nods. Compromise sprouts from greed and extreme fear. But your concern is not with that nod. The real obsession lies with those who say no. Because now, he knows who you really are. You have to measure every percentage of probability that he will report you to the local counterintelligence agency. You earn $92,000 a year for this suffocating neurological torment. In your first term, with drinks and sincere lies, you successfully broke and recruited 4 lives. One of those sources provided a file that went straight to the White House. As you walk out of the coffee shop, watching the target's lonely figure disappear into the distance, no applause rings out. No one in this world will ever know that you have just successfully assassinated a person's humanity. A routine job, repeated until the soul is exhausted. Rank 3. Paramilitary Operations Officer. You leave behind the red-carpeted diplomatic corridors and contracts, reeking of betrayal, to step into a space completely devoid of legality. You volunteer to join the Paramilitary Operations Branch. Here, a concept of denial zone is maintained, which is not a geographical term, but a state of zero human rights. You learn to shoot, master combat skills, and undergo rigorous training to increase your ability to withstand the highest pressure in dangerous operational environments. Because you know that if your cover is blown, if you fall on a dirt road in some country, the US government will default you never existed. You are sent to places without embassies. Your team has 5 people. You carry your own encryption equipment. You carry your own medical supplies. There is no rapid reaction force, no helicopter support. You grow a scraggly beard. You wear the tattered clothes of the locals. You cram their language to negotiate with the guards, who are ready to pull the trigger if they know your identity. The silence at the border is not like the soulless stillness at Langley. It is a darkness waiting to devour. Some missions last 3 weeks. Some deployments wear you down for 11 months. You sit alone on the edge of a quiet night parking lot, watching the red glow of a cigarette burn down, flicking gray ash onto your shoes. Your risk conversion system deposits allowances directly into your account. Emotionless numbers cannot fill the void of existence. You are paid $115,000 a year. Once a month, you are granted satellite access. You press the cold metal speaker to your ear. On the other end, your child's tiny voice is lost in the static. They ask when you're coming home. You look at your dust-covered hands. Slowly you reply, "Soon, my child." That was the 7th time you used the word soon. Each time you utter that gentle lie, a piece of your humanity peels off, falling into the void of the institution. You hang up. You return to being an invisible ghost. Rank 4. Station Chief. You leave behind barren lands and an atmosphere thick with rejection, carrying a self perfectly honed to enter a soundproof, felt-lined room. Your silent survival through life and death boundaries has granted you a new privilege, becoming the manager of lies. Now, you are the station chief. Every officer, Every analyst, every undercover agent in this country is under your absolute control. The compensation for this absolute control is $150,000 per year. You move into an upscale diplomatic residence. On the surface, it's quiet luxury, but in reality, it's an invisible prison. Every 72 hours, a technical team silently sweeps every wall, under every bed, and every crevice for electronic bugs. You learn to live with invisible surveillance. Between the bedroom and the living room is a lead-lined steel door leading to a secure communication booth. There are no windows, only the monotonous hum of the encryption server system, operating day and night. 10:42 p.m. The subconscious warning system in your brain just activated. The man at the table to your left has looked at you 3 times. The intervals between his glances are too regular. His focus is too sharp for someone having a late coffee. He hasn't touched his phone screen. There's no food on his table. He's just sitting there, observing. You don't change your posture. In this world, a startled reaction is the clearest confession. You raise the ceramic cup to your lips, letting your gaze slide across the reflective window behind you. He's still fixated on the back of your neck. You stand up, push in your chair, leave the cafe, not hurried, not hesitant, a pace that blends perfectly into the mundane crowd. Footsteps following appear exactly 8 seconds later. The rhythm echoes on the asphalt. Professional. The distance is maintained at a fixed level. You turn right. He turns right. You've observed long enough to know this is no longer a coincidence. You turn sharply into a narrow alley. You stop. Turn around. The palm of your right hand has slowly lowered close to the hem of your jacket. The footsteps behind you slow down, then stop completely. The flickering fluorescent light in the narrow alley cuts his face into disjointed segments. You drop this. A leather wallet is extended. It's not yours. You don't take it, nor do you blink. 2 seconds of silence stretch like a death sentence suspended in the darkness. Then he smirked, a forced smile for social courtesy. Relax, he said. I'm not one of them. No harmless passerby uses the pronoun them in a secluded alley. You took half a step back, lowered your center of gravity, fixed your pivot point. 3 variables processed almost simultaneously. Attack distance, visual blind spot, retreat path. Hundreds of thoughts flashed through your mind. If he was right, you were about to break the neck of an innocent citizen. If he was wrong, you had just wasted 3 vital seconds. Your mind tensed. If he moved even slightly, you would pull the trigger immediately. Hey buddy, have you seen my wallet anywhere? A third voice tore through the thick atmosphere. A gasp echoed from the end of the alley. A disheveled, disoriented, sweating man was rushing over. The person in front of you froze. The tension in his eyes suddenly turned into a very ordinary look of confusion. He turned to the other man. Your wallet? No organization. No tail. The phrase, one of them, was just a random remark from a guy who found a dropped item and thought you were an accomplice of the thief. You had lived too long in danger. Your mind had created its own conspiracy. You slowly loosened your fingers from the lapel of your coat. They returned the wallet, mumbled a few awkward thanks, and left, without looking back. The footsteps faded away. You stood rooted there for another 10 seconds, ensuring everything was safe. Then you walked away like a normal person. But, in your chest, the institutional devastation of your mind had gone too far. The moral line was chillingly thin. If only the man who lost his wallet had appeared a little later. If only you had swung your hand half a second earlier. Tonight would have ended with cleaning up an innocent corpse on the damp, moldy floor. That was the cruel price of carrying a worn-out self. Rank 5. Department Head. You leave behind the sticky, dew-covered parking lots, the suffocating alleys, and the cheap diplomatic facade to step into the silent, carpeted corridors on the 7th floor of Langley. Here, the system rewards your torment with new power. Department Head. The workspace is now larger, but the suffocation is exponentially thicker. Every station chief, from dozens of countries, must report to you via encrypted channels. The daily schedule is a loop of silent power. You enter closed meeting rooms with congressional officials. Phones are confiscated at the door. Pens and paper are strictly forbidden. The greatest national secrets are passed by word of mouth. lingering in the air with a faint smell of machine-brewed coffee, never to appear in any public record. The process at this level turns you into a cold-blooded risk calculation machine. On the smooth wooden table is a submission requesting permission to recruit a high-ranking official from a hostile government. The attached black budget amounts to tens of millions of dollars. The organization demands that you weigh the value of the intelligence obtained against the risk of a diplomatic crisis erupting. If the mission succeeds, that chain of information will be delivered to the president's desk at dawn. No one will mention your name. But if everything falls apart, the entire political disaster will collapse onto this desk. You have to clean up the mess yourself. You earn $180,000 a year to be a bullet shield for an entire institution. 22 years of dedication, serving in 5 countries, recruiting personnel on 4 continents. But the real assets you carry are not in performance reviews. They are in memory. The organization does not allow you to keep photos with your comrades. You are forced to store their achievements in your head, carefully and cherishedly, like a normal person keeps family photos in their wallet. Among them are those who no longer exist. They only remain in your memory, and are one of the 140 stars carved in marble, deep into the stone face at Langley. Nameless. No biography. Among those 140 nameless stars, you know the real names of exactly 4. You know their voices. You know their habits. You once shared old newspapers and cold tea with them on the edge of deserted parking lots. And now, they are just sharp, geometric lines, forever silent under the fluorescent lights. Rank 6. Executive Director. It was the complete concealment of the identities of those unknown stars in the dark recesses of your mind that pushed you through the final door of the system. You entered the highest level executive office. The National Covert Intelligence Branch was now entirely in your hands. Executive Director. The solid oak desk was silent. This space had no room for speculation or drafts. Administrative procedure at the apex of the pyramid was an absolutely ruthless law. Every agent embedded on Earth, every covert operation gnawing at rival institutions, every power manipulation network, all connected into a massive information supply chain. And the end point of that supply chain was you. You picked up the morning newspaper. The front page photo showed a crisis half a world away. Anonymous crowds, shattered streets. The rustle of turning pages was dry. Your eyes scanned the headlines dispassionately. You no longer saw humanity struggling. You only saw geopolitical chess moves meticulously calculated 6 months ago through a dossier you yourself had signed off on in black ink. 7 a.m. You entered the Situation Room. The room was filled with the rustling of thick documents. When a global incident erupted, the president turned to you. The question always followed a closed structure. What options do we have that no one is allowed to know about? You slowly opened the manila folder. You extracted special identifiers, classified far beyond top secret. These were invisible action programs, capable of erasing all ethical traces and never appearing in any congressional hearing records. You dispensed existence and destruction as a routine circular issuance procedure. The concept of right and wrong could no longer penetrate this facade. It was merely numbers to be balanced on a budget report. The remuneration for holding the world-manipulating machine was set at a meager salary cap, even lower than the income of a first-year intern lawyer on Wall Street. But you were not here for the numbers in a bank account. This invisible greatness was the inevitable consequence of an agreement made 26 years ago. Echo. The empty space at the pinnacle of power eventually drifted you towards a quiet present. You sat alone in your car, in an empty night parking lot. The engine had long been off. The paper coffee cup in the holder was cold. Darkness enveloped the cramped space. You looked down at your hands on the steering wheel. These hands had signed tens of thousands of documents. They had approved national security operations, and they had also issued sanctions that took lives. Every stroke of black ink on the printed page carried a quantifiable weight. A signature dropped. Another unknown star might be carved onto the white marble wall at Langley. You learned the habit of reading every administrative regulation very slowly before putting pen to paper. Every single word. And then you still signed. That responsibility was encoded in your bloodstream. The bureaucratic machine had stripped away all milestones of a human life. You were absent from birthday candle blowouts, Funerals of loved ones you couldn't attend. Years when your children learned to walk, babbled your name, then quietly grew up waiting. You traded the integrity of a geopolitical map by permanently leaving an empty seat at your own dinner table. National secrets had aged you faster than the flow of time. Who was the woman who called you that year? You still don't know. Is she alive? Or has she become one of those stars? You also don't know. But the question she asked that day has never disappeared. It repeats, over and over, like an endless loop. If the government asked you to become a completely different person, would you do it? You said yes. 11 seconds of hesitation to exchange for a lifetime. There is no turning back. There has never been an escape route designed in the organization's unwritten code for this sacrifice. The scene is left with only your dry sighs, quickly dissolving into the lifeless stillness of the night.